Unicorns Talk is a weekly podcast where we discuss the ups and downs of the human experience, from personal growth to romantic relationships and everything in between. This show is for life livers, life lovers, and life enhancers. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards, your life enhancement coach, and together we're going to laugh, love, and learn to maneuver all of life's little messes. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's Latrice Sampson Richards here, your life enhancement coach, and you are tuned in to episode 15 of the Unicorns Talk podcast. And today's episode is actually a really special episode for me. We are dedicating this episode to Domestic Violence Awareness Month. As you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as well as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and things like that. And so I really wanted to focus though on domestic violence awareness because I think that it is a topic that doesn't get as much coverage as it should, and it's something that I think we all could learn from, and you can never have enough skill sets in terms of preventing domestic violence or trying to keep yourself from being in a situation like that. So today we are going to be trying to understand domestic violence and understand abuse as much as we can. We're going to break down the different types of abuse, how you can know when you are in an abusive relationship, prevention tactics, as well as fighting back and getting yourself out of that situation. And then the feature today at the very end of the show, we are going to be participating in the hashtag remembermyname. And so the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence actually came up with this hashtag remembermyname, where we recognize or we remember those who were lost to acts of domestic violence. And so my family personally has been rocked, I guess is the only word that comes to my mind, with domestic violence, loss of life due to domestic violence, once in my lifetime, once before my lifetime, both very, very close to my family, and so as early as last year. And so this topic definitely has a very special place with me, especially, like working with the couples that I work with, and, working with individuals trying to find relationships and things like that. I think it's important for us to do what we need to do in order to protect ourselves, and you can never have too much information. All right, so we're going to remember those people, we're going to remember those names, and just kind of take a moment of silence at the end of the show today to memorialize those loved ones. All right. I know I might sound a little different today. I'm sure I sound a little different today. If you had not noticed, I am kind of struggling with my sinuses today. And I've waited till the very last minute to record the podcast, hoping that I would be feeling much better. But unfortunately, that did not happen. I mean, I am feeling better, but I'm not sounding better. And crazy enough, I actually am sounding better, y'all. And so, but this topic was so important that I didn't want to bail on y'all this week. So I got my cup of tea here, and got me some cough drops and things like that. And so I'm going to push through this the best that I can and make this happen, because I think that this is a topic that requires the extra effort. Okay. All right. So excuse me if I'm sounding a little weird today. It's just Mother Nature trying to take over. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So, I think the first step in being able to combat domestic violence is to really understand what abuse looks like. And so we're going to take a few minutes just to kind of understand abuse, okay? So an abusive relationship is a relationship that consists of an imbalance of power. This is where one person almost always has some level of control over the other person, okay? Statistically speaking, about 25% of women and 10% of men in the United States experience domestic abuse. And this is across all socioeconomic backgrounds, all cultural backgrounds. It it doesn't necessarily, like, just because you're wealthy or because you're middle class means that you're immune to the effects or the possibility of abuse in a relationship. However, it is most prevalent in the poorest neighborhoods, as well as those who have some education but have not completed college. And so, it's important for those two particular groups. Everyone should be on guard, obviously, but it's important for those two particular groups to really pay attention because the prevalence is a little bit higher in those groups. All right. I want to talk really briefly about some of the characteristics of an abuser, okay? Because being able to identify at the very beginning of a relationship, or like when you first meet somebody, what those characteristics are, or if you start to see those traits in that person, you can get out a little bit earlier. Your red flags start going off and saying, okay, hold on, this combination of characteristics is, maybe problematic moving forward. Okay. So I want to stress that not any one particular characteristic that I'm going to list here is a sufficient, diagnosis for somebody who's going to be an abuser. But if you see a pattern of behavior, if you see a cluster of these characteristics kind of happening on a frequent basis, then that may be indicative of someone who has the potential to be abusive. Now, somebody who has, positive coping skills, who has learned how to manage the things that they have going on, they may not be as big of a risk, but you still want to have your spidey senses activated, okay? So some of the characteristics of an abuser is someone who is codependent, not really able to, do things without you, really always relying on you for not just, like tangible help, but maybe even emotional validation, things like that. Someone who is emotionally intense, and that vacillates between emotional extremes really easily. One minute I am happy and I'm elated and all is right with the world, and then like literally the next minute, I'm just in the worst place I've ever been in. I'm so sad, I'm so angry, or depressed, or just these large scale kind of vacillations. Okay. Someone who has been the former victim of abuse definitely has a higher likelihood of becoming an abuser, but it's not a guarantee that they will. Okay, that can go either way. But if you know that this person has a history of abuse in their childhood or in their upbringing, whereas they were the victim of abuse, then you might want to just pay a little bit more attention, especially if these other characteristics are also present. Okay, someone who is excessively controlling, has poor coping skills, bottles up their emotions, doesn't really discuss what's going on with them, judgmental, inflexible, and especially someone who has a dysfunctional relationship with their close family and friends. If you are dating someone who treats his family horribly or treats her family horribly, has no real strong connections, constantly in a state of chaos with their close friends and family, just is aggressive toward their parents or siblings, that's somebody that you might want to think twice about being in a serious relationship with, because these are the people that they supposedly love. You're still getting to know this person. So if they would treat them like that, what makes you think that they won't do you the same thing? Okay. So, like I said, again, it's not any one characteristic that is enough to identify somebody as a potential abuser. However, a cluster of characteristics, that present itself over time is definitely a red flag. And it's something that you want to pay attention to and really consider whether or not this is a person that you want to be in a committed relationship with. Okay. Next, I want to talk about some of the different types of abuse. Okay, so we know some of the more common types of abuse, things like physical abuse, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse. But I also want to talk about financial abuse as well as digital abuse. Okay, so really quickly, physical abuse obviously is a physical attack. all right? But it doesn't have to be daily in order for it to be considered abuse. It can happen one time, or more often than not, it happens in a cycle, all right? So this cycle kind of has three main parts. It starts off with a period of calm, right? So everything is good, everything is great, it's calm, we're getting along, things are going well. And then there's an escalation, right? So maybe something happens, there's some type of trigger or something like that, and this person kind of switches, their emotional extremes, and the situation starts to escalate, okay? Maybe I lose my job, or maybe he loses his job, or that person loses their job. That may be a trigger that can trigger an escalation in this cycle, all right? And then comes the attack, all right? And then once the attack, and this is the physical attack, this is actually hitting, punching, slapping, spitting, kicking, choking, pulling your hair, like it doesn't have to only be like what we consider like punching somebody in the face, though it is, but it's a lot of different things, okay? Once the attack takes place, the cycle can begin all over again, and there's no set time for when it might escalate again, okay? Other forms of physical abuse is denying you sleep or nourishment, breaking things, punching holes in the wall, barricading or blocking you from escaping or getting help, like physically keeping you from escaping or getting out of the situation, being physically abusive toward children. Another big one that I see, and I have heard people, not just clients, but I have heard people talk about this, and sadly enough, kind of chuckle when they say it. And every single time I hear it, I cringe because it's not funny. It is abuse, or at the very least, a precursor to abuse. But kicking you out of a car and leaving you on the side of the road, or in a strange place, like deserting you, kicking you out of a car and deserting you on the side of a road, that is a physically abusive type of situation, okay? It's not okay for somebody to get so angry that they put you out of your car or out of their car on the side of the road to kind of fend for yourself, especially if it's a dangerous situation, if you're on a highway, if you're in a bad neighborhood or something like that. For somebody to physically abandon you and not be concerned with your physical well-being, that is a problem, okay? And like I said, I've heard far too many times, sadly, I have heard people kind of recount tales of being kicked out of the car and left on the side of the road, and they laugh about it. And I'm just like, that is not funny. That is something that needs to be taken very, very seriously, okay? Besides the fact that it is, abusive, just point blank abusive, but I think it really speaks to like what this person thinks of you as a human being. If I am in a relationship with someone who says that they love me, I believe that they have a responsibility to care for me and to care about my well-being. And leaving me on the side of the road is a very clear indication that that care does not exist, okay? So definitely pay attention to some of those warning signs and some of those different types of physical abuse, all right? Next is emotional abuse. So emotional abuse are non-physical behaviors that can lead to low self-esteem, emotional pain and scarring, loss of self-confidence, and kind of being in this constant state of fear, worry, or concern. All right. Emotional abuse can include name calling, constant criticism, intentionally embarrassing you, threatening to hurt you or others, including children and pets, or even threatening to hurt themselves, like threatening to commit suicide or threatening to slit their wrist or something like that. That is a play on your emotions, and it's not fair. It is abusive, okay? Using the children against you, blaming you for everything. It doesn't matter what happened, everything is always your fault, isolating you from friends and family, making you feel guilty for their negative behavior, and having multiple affairs and being just completely disregarding your feelings as it relates to the things that are happening in a relationship or your wants, needs, or desires within the relationship. Those are all different types of emotional abuse. And again, sadly, and way too commonly, we experience these things in relationships and we just kind of write them off. Now, just like I said before, not any one of these at any given time is enough to, kind of say, okay, this is an abuser or this is an abusive situation. However, these things should be red flags at the very least. These should be things that make you think again about being in a relationship with this person. The next type of abuse is sexual abuse, okay? And so, as most of us know, sexual abuse is any form of unwanted sexual behavior. And this includes sexual coercion and reproductive coercion, okay? Sexual coercion is being forced to have sex. So, rape, so definitely including rape. But this can also include controlling the way that you dress, making you use drugs or alcohol, or forcing you to use drugs or alcohol to have sex without your consent, or making you watch porn against your will. Reproductive coercion is not allowing you to have a choice in pregnancy, whether that is making you pregnant or terminating your pregnancy against your will. This also includes an aggressive tracking of your period. I want to point out here that you keep hearing me say aggressive or intense and like these extreme kind of words. And I want to make sure that we understand that that is what we're talking about. We're not talking about, I'm tired tonight and I don't feel like having sex and my husband keeps nudging me or my boyfriend keeps tapping me on my shoulder. That's not necessarily a sexual abuse, but forcefully taking over your body and forcing you to have sex when you're not prepared, if your body is not physically prepared to engage in intercourse, or when you just don't want to. Those extreme type of situations are definitely enough to classify as sexual abuse. I also want to address a common rumor that I hear, and it just bothers me. Y'all have no idea how much it bothers me. But I have heard people say repeatedly that your husband can't rape you. It's not rape if you're married, and that is a falsehood. Okay, if I don't want to have sex and someone is forcing me to have sex, it is rape. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter whether I'm married to that person or not. No means no. Okay? So any type of forced, unwanted sexual behavior, regardless of where it comes from, even if it is your husband, even if it is your wife, it constitutes an abusive sexual experience. Okay? And I think it's extremely important for us to understand that. All right? Next, I want to talk about financial abuse. And this type of abuse doesn't get a whole lot of coverage, right? So we don't always really understand what financial abuse looks like. Financial abuse is when one partner maintains complete control over your finances, okay? So not allowing you to have your own money, even if you go to work and like they take your check or they have access over your direct deposit or something like that, and you're not allowed to have any part of your own money, or not allowing you to having access to joint funds. Okay, another form of financial abuse within a relationship is purposely ruining your credit by opening up accounts or bills in your name. So if you're in a relationship with someone and they are purposely ruining your credit, so that you have to always come to them for your financial needs, that is an abusive situation. If they are withholding money for your basic needs like groceries or medicines or even your feminine hygiene products, that is financial abuse within a relationship. So anytime someone has complete control over your finances and they use that to your detriment, that is an abusive situation. And it's a situation that you need to consider getting yourself out of. Okay? All right. And then the last type of abuse I want to talk about today is digital abuse. Okay. And so digital abuse is using social media or technology to threaten, stalk, or bully you. Okay. And a really good example of this is, like hacking into your email, sending emails and things like that, or like tracking your social media, telling you who you can and cannot be friends with. And this is more than just, that this person tried to talk to you, and so I don't want you friends with that person. That's not, I think, sufficient to be considered full-blown abuse. But someone who literally chooses your friends for you, that may be a bigger issue. Another form of digital abuse is someone like posting your nudes or like sex tapes or something that, when you're in a relationship with somebody, you might do things like that and send little sex, messages to each other. And someone sharing that with other people or posting that online, that is abuse, okay? Also, using tracking devices. I have heard of people using tracking devices on their spouses, on their loved ones, and people that they're in relationships with. That is digital abuse. That is not okay, especially when that's happening without the other person's consent or knowledge. All right. So, those are your 5 main types of abuse within a relationship. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, and digital abuse. Okay. And again, like I said before, I'm going to say it again. It's not just one thing happening. We're looking for a pattern of behavior, unless or depending on how significant that one behavior actually was. Okay? All right. Next, I want to talk about how to know when you are in an abusive relationship. Okay? I think the biggest weapon that you have in terms of understanding and being able to identify that you are in an abusive relationship is the way that you feel. So, really paying attention to how you are feeling within that relationship. Some of the negative emotions that are most common within abusive relationships is loneliness, depression, powerlessness, embarrassment, shame, anxiety, maybe even being suicidal, having some fear, feeling isolated, okay, trapped, hopeless. These are all words that we tend to start using when we are in an abusive relationship, okay? Also, the negative thoughts that we start having about ourselves. Like maybe I never was self conscious, or I never, questioned my looks or questioned my worth. And now that I'm with this person, he's always telling me how worthless I am, how ugly I am, how, lucky I am to be with somebody like him. And maybe now I'm starting to internalize those things. And as a result of what he's saying, I start to think negatively about myself. So, really paying attention to how you feel within that relationship is really, an important step in being able to identify whether or not you may be in an abusive relationship. Okay. Another indicator is if the relationship is moving too fast. So, if your partner is pushing for a commitment like way before you're ready to, or even before you really have time to get to know each other, and that person does not respect your desire to slow down. So if you think back on the beginning of your relationship and you realize, man, this went a lot faster than I thought a lot faster than I was comfortable with, and you have some of those other characteristics taking place in your relationship, and it might mean that you're in an abusive relationship or in a relationship that has a high likelihood of turning abusive. Okay. Another indicator is paying attention to the communication. Okay. How do your arguments take place within the relationship? Do you talk it out, or does it immediately escalate to a yelling match? Does your partner shut down and throw volatile tantrums? Is the communication open and transparent, or is it one-sided and really kind of coded? Like, what does that look like? You want to make sure that the communication is assertive and not aggressive or passive aggressive. And finally, you want to pay attention to whether or not your relationship is predictable or unpredictable. Okay. And what I mean by that is, every time you interact with this person, are you getting a different person? Are you in a situation where you never know who you're going to get from one moment to the next? One moment they might be really sweet and caring, and then mean and aggressive the next with little to no trigger. Okay. So this air of unpredictability is a really good indicator that you may be in an abusive relationship. If you always feel like you're walking on eggshells, that is a problem. All right. So these are just a few, like really, really brief overview of ways that you might be able to identify that you're in an abusive relationship. And again, you're looking for a culmination of experiences, not just one or two isolated experiences. So next, I want to talk about prevention. And so I think that there are a few things across the board that we can do to prevent ourselves from being in this type of situation, or to prevent it as much as possible. First of all, you definitely want to adopt a zero tolerance for violence, okay? Absolute zero tolerance for violence. It is not okay for your partner to hit you in an effort to harm you, bruise you, or scare you, okay? There needs to be a zero tolerance for violence across the board. And if the situation ever does take a violent turn, you need to take action, all right? And also pay attention. Don't let the little things go without discussion, okay? You want to talk assertively about what was done and what you did not approve of, and you want to set boundaries right then and there in that moment. Like I've said 100 times already, it's not any one thing on any of these lists that is indicative of an abusive relationship. But if something on this list happens, the first time that it happens, you need to have an open discussion about it in that moment and pay attention to how they respond. Once you set your boundaries, this is what you did that I did not like, and this is what I need you to do instead, or this is what I need you to never do again. Like, once you set those boundaries, pay attention to how they respond to your boundaries. Did they respect your boundaries? Did they accept responsibility for their behavior, for their action? Maybe they just didn't realize that they were doing that. Maybe they have some bad coping skills, and this is how they've learned to be. And maybe they need to learn a new way to exist in a relationship, okay? How did they receive your feedback? Or did they get really upset and blow up on you and make the situation even worse than what it was, okay? Pay attention to how you feel, pay attention to what's done, speak on it, okay? And then pay attention to how they respond to that. And above all else, you want to trust your gut. If you have a gut feeling that this is an unhealthy relationship, you need to go with it, all right? And the way I see it, you don't get a gut instinct about everything. So for something to have that extra little bit of oomph on it, it means that you probably need to pay attention, because you never know. It could actually save your life, all right? Next, I want to talk about fighting back. So how to get yourself out of an abusive relationship. So once you identify that you are in an abusive relationship, how do I get myself out of this situation? Well, first and foremost, you got to take action. You have to do something. The very first time the relationship takes a turn, you need to take action. You need to fight back, okay? You definitely want to try to talk to someone who has a track record of existing inside of a healthy relationship, and you talk to that person for advice, somebody that you trust. If things get violent, you want to protect your person first and foremost. So that means if you need to physically fight back, then you do that. Whatever you need to do to protect yourself physically in that moment, then that's what you do. And then the first chance you get, you contact 911 or some type of emergency services. You want to tell them exactly what happened and do not change your story. All too often we hear about domestic violence situations where the police are called, they come out, and then the victim changes their story and decides that they don't want to move forward with pressing charges. And inevitably, it happens again, okay? And so you want to make sure that you stick to your story and that you give those authorities or give that justice system an opportunity to actually help you, all right? You want to get the names of the responding officers, you want to get their badge numbers. You also want to try to get a case report number or like a report number, so that you can have that information as well, okay? Definitely try to create a safety plan. So what do you do if you are at immediate risk? Okay. Do you have a bag that's packed and kept in the trunk? Do you have a safe house, someone's house that if you show up at this person's house, they already know what the situation is and they're prepared to try to help you? Set up some type of getaway ride, maybe a code word or something that you can use with a friend or a family member, so that if you need to get to safety very quickly, that you can activate that plan and make it happen, okay? Above all else, I think you want to end the relationship. You want to end the relationship absolutely as soon as possible, but you also want to do so safely, okay? You want to create a plan and you want to stick to it. It's really important for you to put your feelings to the side in that moment. When you create a plan to end the relationship and you actually move forward with ending that relationship, you have to put your feelings to the side so that you're not clouded by your urges to stay. Because you're there because you love that person or there's some type of emotional connection or pull to that person. And that is going to make it extremely difficult when the time comes to actually leave. And this is one of the very few times that I'm going to tell you to suppress those feelings, okay? Push those feelings far, far down and do what you need to do to get yourself out of that situation. And once you are to safety, then you want to seek counseling and process and deal with those feelings, okay? Bring a support system with you if you need to. Like when it's time for you to have that talk about, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. Make sure that you have somebody there to support you, especially if that conversation has the potential to get violent. In that communication, you have to be clear about what's going to happen next. I no longer want to be in this relationship with you. I am done. Leave me alone. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't write me. Don't send a smoke signal. Whatever it is that you need to say, you have to be clear and you have to be firm, okay? That you can't leave any wiggle room there, because that person will definitely utilize manipulation tactics and try to exploit your emotion. And finally, use your resources, okay? If you need to get a personal protection order or a restraining order, do that. If you need to sever mutual relationships and reset those boundaries, or just kind of reset the boundaries with those people and let them know where you stand, do that, okay? I need you to be a resource. I need you to be an ally, and I need you to respect that I'm trying to get myself out of this situation. If you don't feel like that person is a person that you can trust, if you don't feel like that person is someone who is actually a mutual friend and not just a one-sided friend, okay, not just only more loyal to the other person or to your abuser, then don't share that sensitive information with them. Contact any type of local organizations and providers or shelters. Make sure that you know what options are available to you in your area, okay? Make sure you have contact with police and emergency services. And then also reach out to national organizations like the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, who we actually I donated to this year, in an effort to try to increase awareness on domestic violence and try to get as many people to safety as possible. And finally, you can reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799 7233. Okay. If you're not sure what resources are available in your area, if you need help making a plan, if you need help making a connection to different resources in your area, call that number. If you just need encouragement, call that number. There are people who will answer that phone who are qualified to help you get yourself to safety and get your children to safety if that's necessary as well. Okay, so as far as information is concerned, that's all I have for y'all today. All right. And I know that today's episode was a really heavy episode, and I don't apologize for that. Okay. Because the reality is that domestic violence is preventable. Okay. We just need to be diligent about it. And it's not something that you need to be ashamed of. If you find yourself in a domestic violence situation, it is never too late to do what you need to do in order to get help, because you never know, it could literally be a life or death situation. To lose a family member to domestic violence is a very difficult thing to process. I think to lose a family member at all is difficult, just in general. But there's something about that person being taken by someone who claims to love them. It just, I don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around. Last year in July of 2016, I was faced with having to wrap my head around that when my cousin was murdered by her child's father. It was devastating for me as a family member. Just, knowing that somebody that I loved experienced such a tragic, just horrific experience. And I just feel like I want to try to prevent as many people as possible from having to experience this. Okay. And so one last plea, I guess, that I have is, if you are in an abusive relationship and you cannot find it within yourself to leave that relationship, or you're making excuses for those experiences, or if your children are not a good enough reason to get yourself out of that experience, I just want you to think about the people that you'll be leaving behind. Okay. They love you, and they don't want to see anything bad happen to you. And so take the precautions that you need to take to prevent that level of sadness and pain from being inflicted upon the people that love you the most. Choose yourself over anybody else. Demand the respect that you deserve. Enforce those boundaries and take action to make sure that you're being loved on the way that you deserve to be loved on. Okay? Finally, as we close the show today, I just want to go over this list of names. We're going to do the hashtag remembermyname, and then a brief moment of silence following that. Now, I received 7 names for the memorial, Remember My Name Memorial. And this is something that I'm going to do every year. And so I'm hoping that every year this list grows longer and longer. But I'm going to speak these names as they were provided to me. And then we'll do a brief moment of silence, and then I'll go ahead and close out the show. Okay? Remember my name: Jamie Wilson, Shelly Renee Wilson, Chantel Scott, Deborah Easley, Jessica, Chandrika Davis Dejo, Keosha Spikes, and Marguerite Davis. For all of those who've lost a loved one to domestic violence, I definitely send my condolences, and I am, just sending peace and healing your direction. For those who are in an abusive relationship, I send you strength, I send you courage, I send you love, and I send you the willpower to do what you need to do to get yourself out of that situation. All right. If you or somebody that you know is in an abusive relationship, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. That's all I have for y'all today. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Again, I know that today's topic was really heavy and it was very information heavy, and I do not apologize for that. Be safe, take the necessary precautions, do what you have to do to be loved on the way that you deserve to be loved on, okay? Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Unicorns Talk Pod. Facebook page is soon to come. If you have any topic or show ideas, show topics or ideas, shoot me an email at unicornstalkpodcast@latricesampsonrichards.com. And until next time, be well.